Boeing sold a plane that would fall from the sky. When the first of the MAX series planes rolled out in 2017, after obtaining FAA approval, it was supposed to mark a new era in aircraft design. Instead, it became a cautionary tale, a massive scandal, and the devastating reality that 346 people lost their lives because of negligence. This is the story of how Boeing lied, tried to hide it, and ruined its reputation. Rockets, satellites, missiles, and, of course, airplanes. The Boeing company is recognized today as one of the largest multinational corporations, valued at over $150 billion. Of course, its meteoric rise wasn't easy, often controversial, and at times criminal. However, before we dive deeper into the scandals that have shaped and shifted the Boeing company, we have to take a look back at where it all started. Who was Boeing? Yes, William E. Boeing was a real person, but he didn't start an aviation company named after himself. Boeing was a lumber industrialist who'd made his fortune partly through generational wealth left behind by his father, Wilhelm Boeing, and partly through the United States construction boom in the early 20th century. Boeing was fascinated by flying. After watching his first piloted aircraft take off in 1909, Boeing was said to have asked every pilot at a flying meet if they'd let him fly their plane. All of them said no. That didn't slow him down, and he eventually took flying lessons, bought a plane himself, and then in 1916 joined forces with Conrad Westervelt to form B&W Seaplanes. We could build a better plane ourselves and build it faster. That's what Boeing told Westervelt, a US Navy engineer, when he realized it would take months to fix his damaged Martin TA Hydro aeroplane. Boeing had the money, Westervelt had the skills, and they both had the drive to make it work. Eventually, they founded a seaplane company that was incorporated as the Pacific Aero Products Company. It would take another year, 1917, for the company to be renamed as the Boeing Company. Concurrent to the establishment of the world's most successful aircraft manufacturer, the First World War was also going on. So, in 1917, the US Navy placed an order for 50 seaplanes. The Boeing Company was contracted by the US Army Air Forces during the Second World War, where it delivered the world-renowned B-17 Flying Fortress and B-29 Super Fortress bombers. This wasn't what Boeing had envisioned for his company, and he soon shifted his focus to commercial flying and transporting airmail. That's when Boeing really took off. Boeing Air Transport was established in 1927 to carry airmail and soon enough its first flight of passengers. By 1929, Boeing merged aviation operations with Pratt & Whitney and others to form United Aircraft and Transport Corporation, incorporating airlines and manufacturing across the aviation spectrum. In 1934, Airmail Act tore Boeing apart, forcing it to split its airline empire into separate companies. But from that fracture, Boeing clawed its way back. The arrival of the 707 in 1958 launched the jet age and established Boeing's iron grip on commercial aviation. The 747 soon followed, reshaping global travel. Yet, by 2023, even the mighty Queen of the Skies took its final bow. Expansion didn't stop. Helicopters, satellites, defense contracts, Boeing devoured it all. But the real shift came in 1997, when it merged with McDonnell Douglas. That's when some claimed that engineering took the back seat and profit took the wheel. In 2025, Boeing stands powerful but haunted, dominant in aerospace, yet shadowed by its compromises. A century of innovation now carries the weight of its own ambition. MAX 7, MAX 8, MAX 9 and MAX 10. In August of 2011, Boeing Commercial Airplanes announced it would be building the fourth generation of the Boeing 737. There'd be a few major differences between the MAX series and its predecessor, Next Generation. CFM International LEAP engines, split-tip winglets and structural modifications. The 737 MAX series promised airlines reduced fuel consumption, lower operating costs, and improved range, all while offering more passenger comfort with redesigned cabins. Boeing designed the MAX series for short to medium-haul flights and began transporting passengers almost immediately after receiving FAA approval in 2017. Understandably, when the first plane in the MAX series was completed in 2016, it was expected to perform better than the planes Boeing commercial airplanes had manufactured before. More importantly, it was supposed to shift the focus from the Airbus. But can a plane series be cursed? It seemed like it was designed by clowns, a harsh statement actually quoted from engineers who worked on the MAX project. That's right, after fatal crashes, email exchanges from employees working on the project from 2015 through 2018 came to light. Disturbing would be an understatement for how the team that quite literally built the aircraft described its fatal flaws. Would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft? I wouldn't. In instant messages sent in April 2017, complaining about the MAX's flight management technology, an unnamed employee wrote, "This airplane is designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys." They referred to its piss-poor design and urged, "Let's just patch the leaky boat." Referring to the Federal Aviation Authority, the US regulator that certified the plane as safe to fly, another message says, "I'll be shocked if the FAA passes this turd." Another boasted in 2015 of Jedi mind tricking a national aviation safety body by making them feel stupid for pushing for more training requirements, saying, "I should be given $1,000 every time I take one of these calls. I saved this company a sick amount of dollars." One employee said in 2018, "I still haven't been forgiven by God for the covering up I did last year." They were talking specifically about the structural compromises made to reduce manufacturing costs and increase profitability. At the end of the day, Boeing wanted to make money, and that meant cutting corners wherever the company could. To compete with Airbus's A320neo without triggering expensive and time-consuming pilot retraining, Boeing crafted the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, the MCAS, to treat aerodynamic shifts caused by larger engines. But MCAS was built on a single point failure. It relied solely on one angle of attack sensor. Should that sensor malfunction, MCAS could trigger uncommanded nose-down trim without backup safeguards. This fatal flaw killed a combined 346 passengers on board the Lion Air Flight Indonesia 610 in 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in 2019. And the worst part is that it could have been avoided easily. Mark Faulkner, the chief technical pilot for the MAX program, had known about the faulty MCAS. He knew that the newly integrated system was far more aggressive than what they'd initially designed. His name came up during the Boeing leak where he admitted the MCAS was egregious. Worse still was the fact that he claimed he'd unknowingly lied to regulators about the MCAS because he didn't fully understand it himself. Pilots didn't even know about MCAS's existence when it malfunctioned during the fatal crashes, and Faulkner was the one, on behalf of Boeing, who convinced regulators that the system did not need to be included in pilot manuals or required any special training. Multiple insider messages from 2016 showed engineers voicing deep unease about MCAS. They knew it was dangerous, yet Boeing leadership still pressed ahead, prioritizing delivery schedules and cost savings. A 2020 House Committee review echoed this, revealing Boeing minimized pilot training requirements and withheld details about MCAS from pilots and regulators. Boeing eventually left him high and dry, but we'll cover that in a minute. Right now, we're not even through with the several issues the MAX series had and the company tried to cover up. A 2016 Boeing internal survey presented by a whistleblower showed nearly 40% of staff felt undue pressure and nearly 30% feared retaliation for raising safety concerns. The MCAS wasn't where the issues with the MAX series stopped. After the 2019 Ethiopian Airlines crash, one of the most prolific whistleblowers in history, Ed Pierson, revealed that there were unexplainable electrical anomalies in the plane. These issues included intermittent autopilot fluctuations, erratic vertical speed readings, and APU warning lights just weeks after delivery. An internal email from Boeing engineers in late 2018 flagged possible wiring faults. Yes, the faults were acknowledged but not resolved, and 157 people died. FAA interviews revealed unauthorized post-inspection work on electrical components. Engineers admitted parts were altered after quality checks, some in violation of regulations. Boeing denies full disclosure, indicating a pattern of concealment. The company knowingly shipped aircraft with unresolved electrical defects. Hauntingly, 1,727 MAX aircraft are in service as of 2025. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 took off from Jakarta, Indonesia, bound for Pangkal Pinang. Less than 13 minutes after departure, it plunged into the Java Sea, killing all 189 passengers and crew. It was the first crash involving Boeing's new 737 MAX series, a tragedy that marked the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in modern aviation. Lion Air Flight 610 was flying a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8, delivered just months earlier. Flight 610 took off with a faulty angle of attack sensor, which incorrectly signaled that the nose was too high. You see, the newly integrated MCAS software was designed to automatically push the plane's nose down if it detected the aircraft was climbing too steeply. The incorrect sensor triggered the MCAS to repeatedly push the aircraft's nose downward, and the pilots didn't even know that MCAS existed. Boeing hadn't disclosed that information, claiming that the newly launched and incredibly aggressive system didn't need any special training whatsoever. Pilots struggled to counteract the system's automatic inputs. Despite multiple nosedives, they continued fighting for control, manually trying to trim the plane back into level flight. But they didn't even know what was happening, much less on how to disable the MCAS. Nothing worked, nothing was going to work. At 6:32 a.m. local time, the aircraft dove one final time into the sea. 12 minutes. That's how long it took for 189 people to lose their lives. At 6:20 a.m., they boarded the plane with no worries and concerns. A few minutes later, they realized that something was wrong, and towards the 12th minute mark, they were saying their prayers, hoping for a miracle, but no miracle came. All 189 passengers died. The tragedy could have been entirely prevented at multiple stages. The faulty AOA sensor had malfunctioned on the very same aircraft during the previous flight. A third pilot, riding in the cockpit jump seat during that earlier flight, recognized the problem and advised the crew to disable the trim system, allowing them to land safely. Had proper maintenance been performed to identify and fix the faulty sensor after that incident, Flight 610 might never have taken off with the same defect. More importantly, if the pilots had been properly trained on MCAS behavior and override procedures, they might have recognized the problem quickly and shut the system off. Boeing's design itself was deeply flawed. It was the product of poor design choices, corporate shortcuts, regulatory complacency, and missed warning signs. And sadly, it wouldn't be the last tragedy in the MAX series history. The Lion Air flight was devastating, and the Ethiopian Airlines crash was infuriating. Both of them could have been avoided. But now, Boeing had a year to acknowledge its faulty system and work towards solutions. It did not. On March 10, 2019, the brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8 took off from Addis Ababa with 157 people on board. 6 minutes after departure, it slammed into the ground near Bishoftu, Ethiopia. No one survived. The incident shocked the world, not only because of the loss of life, but because it exposed how little had changed since the Lion Air crash just 5 months earlier. Once again, at the heart of the disaster was Boeing's MCAS. The system would operate silently in the background without requiring pilot input, but its design relied on data from a single AOA sensor. If that sensor was faulty, which it was, the MCAS would react as if the aircraft were stalling, when it wasn't. And, once again, shortly after takeoff, one of the AOA sensors malfunctioned and incorrectly indicated that the plane's nose was too high. MCAS kicked in automatically, forcing the nose downward. The pilot struggled to counteract this unexpected behavior, pulling the nose back up repeatedly as MCAS activated again and again. They initially followed emergency procedures by cutting off the stabilizer trim, but because the aircraft was traveling at such a high speed, manually trimming the stabilizer became physically impossible. The pilots lost control as the plane's nose continued its fatal downward pitch. 157 people died, bringing the MAX series' total kill count to 346. Pain, frustration, anger. No words could describe what people felt after the incident made headlines. The Ethiopian's airline crash was wholly preventable. Boeing had been fully aware of MCAS's weaknesses, yet no immediate changes were made to the system's design, and updated training materials were not distributed. Even though Ethiopian Airlines provided simulator training to its pilots, many of these sessions did not cover MCAS failures, largely because Boeing had downplayed its importance during certification. The pilots of Flight 302 faced a situation they were never fully prepared for, fighting against a system they barely knew existed. A former Navy captain, Ed Pierson brought his deep respect for discipline, safety, and responsibility to Boeing's Renton plant, where the company was racing to meet global demand for its newest aircraft, the 737 MAX. During his time at Boeing, Pierson grew increasingly alarmed by what he described as chaotic and unsafe manufacturing conditions on the production line. But unlike Faulkner, Pierson voiced those concerns. Unfortunately, it was like talking into the void. He warned management that production pressure and rush deadlines were creating dangerous vulnerabilities in the aircraft quality. No one listened to Pierson, not because he was wrong or not an integral part of the team, but that listening would mean acknowledging. By simply ignoring his alarms, Boeing could get away with claiming that it was largely unaware of the system malfunctions that led to the loss of 346 lives. At the time, however, what they cared about more than anything was how lucrative the order would be. Why should they stop? Then came October 2018. Lion Air Flight 610 crashed into the sea, killing 189 people. And still, Boeing pushed forward. But Pierson couldn't shake what he knew. He started digging, pouring through internal records tied to the Ethiopian Airlines MAX that would crash just months later. What he found was chilling. The aircraft had been plagued by unresolved electrical anomalies even before it left the ground. Fluctuating vertical speed readings, unexplained autopilot disconnects, and APU shutdown warnings. Some of these anomalies occurred just weeks before the crash. One internal Boeing email even flagged intermittent wiring faults that could affect flight control systems. Pierson provided these documents to Ethiopian crash investigators, who later admitted they had not seen this evidence during their original probe and called the information vital to understanding what went wrong. Internal production logs also showed a pattern of mislabeled components, improperly installed wiring, missing oversight, and critical safety work performed by inadequately trained staff. He also discovered that some electrical components had been modified after final inspections, a direct violation of FAA regulations. FAA interviews later confirmed his worst suspicions. Key safety protocols were being bypassed on brand new jets. Before the Lion Air crash, he had already emailed Boeing leadership with blunt warnings. All my internal warning bells are going off. But after 2 catastrophes, his quiet warnings became public testimony. Pierson became a whistleblower, testifying before Congress in 2019. He described sloppy production processes and slammed both Boeing and regulatory bodies for failing to act on serious safety warnings. Parts shortages, overworked employees, unrelenting overtime, and unresolved safety issues were routine. Pierson described a culture where managers were rewarded for meeting deadlines, not for slowing down to address potential safety hazards. Workers feared raising concerns because doing so might jeopardize their positions or delay production targets. I tried to get them to shut down production. I recommended that they shut down production. Boeing executives privately expressed frustration, and while they didn't attack him directly, they worked behind the scenes to cast doubt on his credibility. Boeing never invited him to participate in official internal reviews of the crashes. He had become a liability. Pierson knew it from the day he spoke up. His time at Boeing was about to be over. After leaving the company, he started the Foundation for Aviation Safety, working alongside families of crash victims and regulators to drive reforms within the aviation industry. His work has already contributed to stricter FAA oversight, production caps, and renewed investigations into Boeing's manufacturing practices. Pierson has also been vocal about ongoing safety concerns, recently highlighting troubling issues with Boeing's continued quality control failures, including the Alaska Airlines MAX 9 door plug blowout in 2024. Yes, the MAX series is still imperfect. The only silver lining to the Ethiopian Airlines 302 crash, and quite literally the only positive outcome from an otherwise catastrophic event, was that Boeing finally acknowledged that there might be a problem. Financially, legally, and reputationally, Boeing was in trouble. As of mid-2025, over 14,000 Boeing passenger aircraft are actively in service worldwide, but traveling back to 2019, Boeing was still one of the largest manufacturers of passenger aircraft, competing with Airbus. Ironically, the competition was what led to oversight or complete ignorance in the MAX series. But Boeing lost that year. Yes, today, Boeing is still a major player, and it's still competing with Airbus even now for dominance. But it lost the same day 346 people lost their lives. People no longer trusted the manufacturer. They wanted answers. They wanted repercussions, and they wanted them without any more unknowing lies. There used to be a saying, "If it's not Boeing, I'm not going." But now, sentiment has flipped. If it's Boeing, I'm not going. Aviation authorities around the world grounded the entire 737 MAX fleet in March 2019. The grounding lasted nearly 2 years, paralyzing Boeing's most lucrative aircraft line and halting thousands of planned deliveries. Airlines scrambled to reshuffle fleets, cancel orders, and demand compensation. Boeing's market value plummeted, and the company reported losses exceeding $20 billion, making it one of the costliest corporate failures in aviation history. Regulators, once trusting of Boeing's internal certification processes, were forced to confront their complicity. The FAA, heavily criticized for allowing Boeing to self-certify aspects of the 737 MAX, faced congressional investigations and a public reckoning. Worldwide, regulatory bodies like EASA in Europe and the CAAC in China began asserting greater independence, rewriting how aircraft would be certified in the future. Under intense scrutiny, Boeing rolled out software overhauls, wiring fixes, and new pilot training. Regulators refused to let Boeing self-certify. Trust had been shattered. In November 2020, after 20 months grounded and 346 lives lost, the FAA cleared the Boeing 737 MAX to fly again. Boeing had lost billions. Its reputation was in freefall. Every flight became a test of public faith. And the nightmare didn't end in 2020. The MAX 737s are still not safe. In January of 2021, Pierson filed a detailed report titled Boeing 737 MAX Still Not Fixed, highlighting unresolved wiring and system flaws that persisted even after the fleet returned to service. Boeing never fixed what was wrong in the first place, according to Pierson. And he was right, because there was a third incident in 2024. In January 2024, an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 soared into the skies above Portland, Oregon. But just 6 minutes after takeoff, a door panel blew off mid-flight. The sudden pressure drop creates an explosive rush of air outward, pulling unsecured objects and people toward the breach. Passengers described a roar, oxygen masks dropping, and a violent blast of air blowing everything out through the opening. 3 people were injured, but no one died, thankfully. That doesn't mean Boeing can let itself off the hook, claiming that the MAX series are safer than what they once were. The point was never lowering faults and malfunctions, it was to eliminate them completely. And Pierson was right, Boeing never bothered going that far. It simply wasn't profitable to do so. The NTSB launched a scathing investigation, revealing the incident wasn't a freak accident. It stemmed from systemic manufacturing failures. Boeing factory workers had removed 4 vital bolts, securing the door plug during a repair, and they never replaced them. And no one bothered to check. As the crisis unfolded, the FAA grounded 171 MAX 9 jets, imposed a production cap of 38 planes per month, and overhauled its oversight procedures. The 737 MAX tragedy wasn't a singular mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices, overlooked warnings, and broken systems. Whistleblowers were ignored, regulators were misled, and hundreds of families were shattered. When corporations lie and people die, someone must be held responsible, and the world should never forget how preventable it all truly was. If you found this story revealing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth breakdowns of the scandals that shaped our world. This is Dominex, where the truth meets bold storytelling.